And you may want perhaps to change something on your website for your specific app. You don't want to have exactly the same look and feel, depending on where you are.
Definitely. And the basics for that is things like viewport. You have to define that there's a viewport, right? Your device has a fixed size. So you know already what you want. There's also something interesting, which is suppressing the default touch action. What happens on the website when you pinch and zoom is fine, but if it's an app,
perhaps you don't want that. Or even when you are on a website and you want to navigate left or right, but just sliding from left to right, perhaps you don't want that on an application.
Exactly. So you have control over that using this config here called suppress touch action, and you put it to true. Notice like the syntax of that file is very JavaScript-ish, right? A lowercase at the beginning.
We try to do that.
I like web developers. That's something that is for you. In terms of styling, then you have two different things you need to think about. The first one is the wrapper itself, right? The Chrome that we add on top of the web page itself around the web view control. Then you need to eventually consider styling. The native elements themselves. We'll talk about that a little. And then there's the web application itself, and that's via the usual CSS injected styles, right?
That's funny because your website will send you some CSS, but you can override them. That's the funny stuff here. I love doing that. So, for instance, you can change the look and feel of Bing, if you want, to have your own Bing with your own colors on your own style.
My own pictures in the background.
Yes, definitely.
With my kids, right?
Sure.
Or your cats.
Or my cats. Or the pony of my wife.
Of your pony of your wife. Okay, let's stop here. Actually, you lost me with the pony of your wife. Sorry for that.
You can inject CSS or you can control the Chrome.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And actually, I'm curious I'm curious to see how it's going to look like when you talked about the iOS and Android support. Because obviously, your what application, if you want to go for iOS and Android versus Windows Phone and Windows, you might want to give it different look and feel.
Absolutely. That's the main goal of these specific features, controlling the look and feel depending on where you are, on what you're running on.
Great. Another thing you want to do, once you've styled it, looks good and so on, is add functionality.
Sure.
On that Home Depot app, you've seen how I could actually bring up the camera, I didn't capture any because I don't have any Home Depot barcode right here, but next time I need to think about it. So basically you can invoke the native resources and basically is something that is very useful for your app in terms of the experience, the integration. The first native feature you might want to use on your Windows Store app with a phone or for Windows is the tiles.
Obviously, this is an entry point of your application.
Exactly, and that's not only the entry point, but that's also the way Windows mobile devices work, right? And the idea is to be able to add information for the user at first glance. And in a nutshell, what we're talking about here is adding a feed, that the tiles can use to display the information.
Absolutely. The first point is what I mentioned into the manifest itself, where you can define your own pictures.
Yes.
And obviously, as you mentioned, you can also have live tiles where the tile will be updated automatically by Windows itself or by the phone itself, just by reading some RSS data. That's pretty cool.
And so you have a primary entry to the application, which is what we call the main tile, and then you have a secondary one, which is actually another page. Let's imagine the main page of my Home Depot app, and eventually a specific section of it, Halloween. And I can bring a pin to the home page of the device to go specifically on that sub page on a device. For the primary tile, actually you will use the package appx manifest file in order to configure that, looking into the visual elements tab, right? When it comes to the secondary pin,
it's just a declaration.
It's just a declaration in the JSON file, as always. So, pretty straightforward. You enable that secondary pin. You put a text in there for the button that will be in your application to add the pin, and then you put the images that you want to show there, right? If you want the tile to be live, you add the live feed like that with tile poll feed function, declarative again, and that's the way you make that tile alive.
Let's imagine, for instance, for Home Depot, they have a website where there are some news using RSS. Then the live tile of your application will display this news. That's pretty amazing because you don't have to code anything, just declaring, I want the news on my tile. Thank you.
Yep. Awesome. Actually, question for you, David. When it's going to come to iOS and Android? with specificities that are proper to Windows.
Yes.
Will you have to delete that part of the code, or
No.
it would just be ignored?
They will be ignored, and obviously for some specificities, or for Android and iOS as well, we will add some specific section where you can declare that will be ignored by Windows.
Okay.
We try to keep things simple.
Easy. The next one is sharing.
Yeah.
If you've been using any mobile device, right, you're actually in an app. Very often, it's an app that displays information, news, and things like that, and you might want to share them. And in Windows, you bring up the charm, and you have a shared button, and all the social media applications and reading lists and so on integrate into that experience.
Yes.
If you want to take advantage of that integrated experience from your WhatsApp, you actually can just invoke the share charm from the application. It's pretty much like straightforward.
You want to enable it, and you say, I want to share a screenshot, a text, or an URL. That's it.
Awesome. So the way you would actually do that is described, as you were saying, in the config file. And the thing here that we're talking about, sorry, I'm switching context here. We're talking about screen search now. So share, you bring it up, it shares, you define that in your config file. Screen search is another very important thing. You can actually have a search functionality into your WhatsApp, whether it's about searching in the app itself, through your website, for a specific word, or whether it's extending the search to more. But in that particular case, we're looking into searching within the website. And what I can see here in that search URL parameter in my config file is a link to myapp.com, which is basically the URL of your site, and search something.
Yes.
So basically, that means the site has a search functionality in there, right?
Absolutely. So, and it will be integrated. So you will have, for instance, a small button into your hotbar. You click on it, a text box will appear. You enter your search, and we will send that for you to this specific URL, myapp.com/search.
Okay.
And the result will be gathered for you and displayed into the app. So the experience for the user will be like, hey, it's a regular application.
Awesome. Like the Home Depot example, I want to search through the
Same
store.
story.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
awesome. Great. Easy. Geolocation, you mentioned that.
Absolutely.
So you can actually take it over from here, because you mentioned the geolocation one earlier, right?
That's pretty straightforward. You just have to say, I want geolocation. And if your website is using HTML5 geolocation API, it will be supported freely for you. It's seamlessly, you don't have to do anything, just ask for what to enable for you the geolocation, and the geolocation of the device will be made available for you to the application itself.
Nice. So that means, as a user, in terms of privacy, do I get to allow the app to get the geolocation information?
As always. You have to allow your user, you will have some kind of pop-up, hey, this application wants to use your geolocation, do you agree? And you have to say yes or no.
So it's not because you're in a web view context using a website that actually
we are still
gets
in
more
the same
priority.
security context.
Love it. Great.
I can continue from here if you
offline
wish.
mode. So you have an app coming from the web, but we want an offline experience,
Yeah,
right? Because the device might not be always connected.
That's the story. When you are on a web browser, obviously you are connected. That's the basics of a web browser. But when you are using an application, sometimes your application, you will launch it when you are in a subway or in some space where there is no network at all. And when you want to launch your application, you want some feedbacks at least. You want to have some, hey guys, this application will not work because you are not connected. You don't want just a 404, which will be the experience we may have on the web page. That's why we decided to support what we call the super cache.
Super cache.
I love this name of this feature. I work a lot on this specific feature. So what we want to do for you is to try to save locally information that you already seen. For instance, if you open your application Home Depot, we will save for you, if the super cache is on, obviously, all the content already gathered. And then if you want to use the application when you are offline, because we already seen the main page, for instance, this page will be saved locally into a cache, into an IndexedDB cache, and then we will be able to serve that even when offline. If the user wants to navigate to a page that the application have never seen, in this specific case, we will display for you a wonderful page saying that something like, I'm sorry, this page is not available, you have to be connected to show this page. The funny stuff is that even if you are doing some search, if you already did that search, it will work.
Awesome. Great.
So how we detect offline status, that's interesting because this is something almost supporting by the website. There are global events that the web browser send us. The web browser can tell us, hey, we are online, we are offline, so we can work with that. The problem is that it's not working well all the time, so it's important for us to have a great infrastructure. It's what we did with the offline support. So sometime, even if we cannot download stuff for some reason, you are not exactly offline, but we cannot download stuff, the offline support will still work. That's important for us. So the user can only want online. That's an option you may have. The user can also have just a local solution for a specific offline scenario. So for instance, you have your own site, but you can also give us some specific page you want to display when we are offline. And obviously, we have the gold version, the VIP version, with the super cache, where everything is saved locally for you freely and seamlessly.
Great.
Sounds good. And obviously, I forgot to mention that, but it's just a declaration. You just have to say offline enable true. That's it.
I think you mentioned that several times.
Perhaps.
A declarative way of configuring your application for it to be available in the stores.
Yep.
You start from the website. We mentioned that in the previous module. You start from a website. You think mobile website, like responsiveness and so on. And now you're at that stage where you actually bring that web experience into the native experience,
including some native options.
Yeah, and we can see that, including native options, and we can see that we start having an overlap with the offline experience that Apache Cordova is really good at delivering. I do see what as a really good complement of Apache Cordova, maybe a step before, or if you're happy with where you're at with your web experience,
you don't need more.
And super cache and so on,
yep.
You're good to go. Another thing we didn't mention, which is very important, actually to the overall experience of an app, the updates. Being a website, you can update it as many times and when you want. The content will be updated live for the user. So that's a very interesting
yeah, that's why I love
feature.
This version.
Great. The other couple of features we didn't mention, but integrating a business model, as in doing advertising and so on, or in-app purchase, a thing that you might want to think about, and what could be a good tool to do that?
Sure, because you like an application, so you have access to almost everything. We have a plugin system into Watt itself, where you can write some JavaScript-specific code if you want.
Yep.
That can be embedded for you into the application itself. So for instance, you are talking about advertising, it could be in-app purchase or whatever. You want that just for your app, not for the website. In this case, the JavaScript required to do that will be developed into the Watt application itself and made this available only for the application and not for the website.
Great.
Pretty cool.
So we have 3 slides with resources that we want to show to the developer. Can you go through them?
Sure. You want me to go for the very first one? It's pretty straightforward. This is the website of Watt, where we have some information. You can download, obviously, the latest version. For now, it's for Windows. We are working hard to get the Android version and then the iOS version. Documentation here is available on a specific site, where you can find almost everything about the config.json file if you want.
Actually, it's in Visual Studio too, right? When you start your app.
This is the same page. We are pointing you to this specific page, or to install or to create. We try to create a lot of, I can say that, tutorial for you guys, so it should be easy to get started. And then if you want to go further, we have obviously a support over a forum. You can open case in the Codeplex site if you want, if you have issues, discussion with people. Everything here is supported for you.
As any open source project.
Yes.
Great.
And the schema itself, just an interesting point. Yeah. This one is the current living document about W3C working on some kind of config.json file for everyone.
So I like the date of that document.
Yes.
Because it's like a few days ago.
Yeah, like it's 3 days ago, or 2 days ago even.
That's really a living document, and that's great to see how the idea of what is to go with the standards. The idea is to deliver something that is standards compliant, but at the same time to propose an approach to W3C to make these standards evolve.
And if you're interested in that, you can start working right now with Watt, and we will be able, once the standard about manifest or web application will be ready, to migrate you from Watt to this specific standard. Awesome. We are discussing with all vendor browsers to try to define something that works well on all platforms.
Awesome. Okay. And we have a last few set of links that we can show rapidly for the attendees to be able to get to them, but you can also find them on the decks. The idea is to find some related reference. Win.js, we're going to talk about it.
Tiles, obviously.
In
the offline mode. I wrote a complete blog here. I can show you if you're interested in how the offline system is working. We explain you all the stuff we are doing for you under the hood.
Awesome. Well, thank you, David. I think it was a great overview of what is about the web app template, and we'll follow up with more modules and sessions about cross-platform development using web technologies, and we'll see you later because you're coming back.
About 3D this time.
Thank you.
See ya, guys.
Hey, welcome back in the MVA cross-platform development with Visual Studio. For this new chapter, we are going to talk about the integration of Cordova in Visual Studio with Kirupa. So, you know myself, I continue to still here, and I'm really enjoyed to introduce Kirupa from the Visual Studio team. We thought it's better to add the creator of the code and the PM of the team for this talk. So Kirupa, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I'm happy to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Kirupa, and I'm a program manager in Visual Studio. And my job is to really make all of your HTML development dreams come true, whether it's writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. My team builds the templates, the code editing features you use, and a whole lot of other things, including support for Windows Store, Windows Phone, as well as what I'm going to be talking about today, Apache Cordova.
Yeah, apparently you don't sleep a lot. But
no, I'm always sleeping.
Okay, module topics. We are going to talk about why with Visual Studio support you build a Hello World application, I think.
Yeah, there'll be several demos, Hello World, and then we jump between slides and some more demos just to give you a casual overview of what exactly happens as you're building your application. So a little bit of code, a little bit of overview, and then a lot of just fun along the way as well.
And a bit of debugging, of course.
Yes.
What happened behind the scene. Oh, testing an iOS app on your Mac, I think?
Correct. I'm running a parallel setup, and I will give you a quick demo of how to use Visual Studio to test your app on iOS.
Okay. And we cover the subject about plugging in the first chapter. So in Visual Studio, how we add plugin in the project and few additional resources.
Correct.
So let's go. Multi-device hybrid app extension.
Yeah, so many of you probably are very familiar with Visual Studio. You've probably used it for many of your projects in the past. And it's a very familiar place for many of us to go and build applications, whether it is writing code, creating new projects, or even testing and debugging your app across a variety of platforms. We exist on all platforms from the web to things that happen on a native device to even applications running on the browser. So we're going to be taking that one step further with this talk, with the support for Apache Cordova, where you're basically using web technologies to basically package your applications to run on devices running on Android, iOS, and Windows Phone.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, what did it take to build a Cordova app?
Basically, you saw earlier from Eric's talk, you can use the command line, you can acquire dependencies, you can do all this stuff manually.
Yeah.
But if you're someone like me who is more interested in this writing markup, writing JavaScript, and less interested in the whole, how do I get things set up to make things work, you have to take care of all the dependencies to install. You need to install Node.js for acquiring packages. You need to install Google Chrome for some of the browser-based testing, some of the command line tools, and a whole host of things that I kind of list in the left column. And Eric, installation is only one part of it, right? Where you install your components, great, but now you need to configure it to actually make work with your build environment. So your command line targets, environment variables, and all these things are just they're not complicated, but they're many small steps that add up to a lot of time. And when things don't work out properly, you're stuck trying to debug and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
So to help with that, we basically have Visual Studio. So basically, imagine that you don't have to do all of this. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So, we lovingly call our little extension the multi-device hybrid apps for Visual Studio. And like I mentioned, we're looking for longer names, so please let us know towards the end. And so let's go to the next slide, Eric.
Yes.
Basically, imagine all those two columns of stuff that I showed you. Ignore all of that. Basically, go to the website. You can Google or Bing for the name, and you'll find it. Download it. It's one simple install. And then after that, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we do take care of all this stuff for you. You can acquire all the third-party dependencies. We configure things to allow you to build for Android, iOS, and for all the Windows platforms. And beyond that, you get all the familiar functionality you've always had with Visual Studio, which is being able to run your app, debug your app. And I'm going to give you some demos that cover some of these things in a little more detail. And of course, also, because we are targeting devices, I will briefly talk about how to add native device capabilities. That's where the plugin story will come in.
Yeah. I confirm the setup story. It's very smooth process. I tried it several times, and it's much easier than the command line things. Even the Cordova, it's well connected with the node, and you can use npm to install Cordova and this kind of stuff. But definitely a setup in a Visual Studio, it's very
Definitely the value we add is that as you're building, as you're installing all the components, for building a simple Hello World app, you don't need everything you need. But as part of testing your application or you want to deploy it, that's where you want to ratchet up all the components you want to install. And we just take care of it all up front, so that way you're not worrying about, I need to basically install this extra additional component to be able to solve this particular part of my workflow. We just simplify these things for you pretty easily.
Sounds very good. So, a first demo?
Let's start with the first demo. I'm actually going to start from the very beginning. So you should see my desktop right now, nothing going on. I'm going to launch Visual Studio. Our extension works on Visual Studio 2013, running on update 3, and it is currently a CTP version 2.0. So I just launched Visual Studio, and right now you see the classic Visual Studio start screen where you have some information going on here and some of the projects that I've created on the left. So what I'm going to do, though, is going to create a new project. When I click on New Project, you get what's known as a New Project dialog. This is the area where you can basically see all the various projects and languages that Visual Studio supports for you to build applications on. I have Visual Basic, C#, C++, all of that. But because the apps we're building are going to be JavaScript-based, I have the JavaScript node expanded already, and I have multi-device hybrid app as a category selected. And so we give you one template out of the box. It is a blank project that, as you'll see shortly, gives you everything you need to start with an application that has all the components you need for a Cordova app. So I'm going to just go ahead and rename this as, let's just call this my demo app. And add the number 2 as well for good measure. And I'm going to hit OK. And Visual Studio will take a few seconds to create the project. And let me go and close the start page that comes up. So first of all, when you see what's created is a slight variation of what you saw with Eric's command line demo, where he added a platform for building a Windows app. What we've done is you have the exact same format. You have the folders, CSS, images, you have the scripts folder, and then some basic content. And we also give you 2 more folders that many Apache Cordova projects have, which is the merges and resources folder. The resources folder, shortcutted as res, is where you put all of your specific device assets, like your splash screen, your icons, and all of that. And then if you have any certificates for building or signing, you'd put that here as well. And the next folder is also your merges folder. The thing to note is that Apache Cordova, unlike other solutions you might have had for building multi-device applications, is really a build once and deploy everywhere kind of a solution. You have one code base that you end up deploying to multiple devices, but there will be times where you want to have slightly different UI or different content that gets served as part of building your application. And that's where the merges folder really comes in. If I want to have some special files that override, like let's say index.html, I would just put index.html right here in the middle of the Android location and be able to have a custom experience for Android.
It's in fact the same pattern that universal app. You have a main directory with all the source code you use for 90% of the application. Correct. And the specific to the platform in different folders, like here for Windows Phone or Windows folders.
Correct, exactly. I mean, the general model of having to, people generally don't want to write code multiple times, especially if it is entirely common. So both the universal apps from our side as well as the Apache Cordova apps, there's a lot of convergence going on in how to make these just more, more productive as you're building these applications without duplicating things unnecessarily.
That's the aim.
Not duplicating code is always a good thing, right?
Yeah,
cool.
Definitely.
So that's a basic overview of project structure. And if I just open up index.html, it really is just basic HTML that you normally see in a web application. David talked a little bit about some of the web app work that they're doing, and it's just basically HTML. And as you'll see shortly, there's some slight twists and turns that make this HTML work on a device. But for now, though, let's just look at it in terms of I have an HTML document, I have standard HTML tags, I have some script references, and that's pretty much it. It's just basically, if you're familiar with web technologies, you'll be very familiar with building apps in Apache Cordova.
Yeah, it's exactly the same structure that a Project Cordova, classical Project Cordova, sorry.
Yep. So, before we go any further, let's see what this application looks like. So you're going to spend a lot of time writing code and writing your CSS and HTML and making sure things work fine. The way you make sure things work fine is by testing your application. And so to help with that, you have the debug toolbar, which is the set of icons I'm currently hovering over on the top.
Yeah.
This is the place where you get to choose the platform you're interested in testing for. And then once you've chosen the platform, be able to select the actual debug target, whether it's a browser, whether it's an actual device or an emulator. So by default, we have Android selected. You can choose between Android, iOS, and multiple flavors of Windows configurations that you might be interested in.
We see exactly at this point the cross-platform effect of the MDD, because it's the first time you can see Android, iOS, Windows Phone in the same combo list in Visual Studio. It's very important.
Absolutely. I mean, we need to have epic background music right now to just to highlight how awesome this is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So I have Android selected, and if I select a drop-down on what I want to preview, you can see some of the Android deploy targets appearing. We have device, we have Android emulator, and your emulator can be either the stock Google SDK one, or you can also have Genymotion or any third-party emulator you want. We work beautifully with all of them. And then I'm going to spend some time with what's known as Ripple. And are you familiar with Ripple, Eric?
Yeah. I'm so familiar with Ripple because I really love the error message when my application don't start, and the Ripple message at this time, it's really, really funny.
Yes. And so, and I'll show you in a second what it looks like. It's basically a way of testing your application in the browser itself. So let me go ahead and select, let's just select Nexus Galaxy, and I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And what's happening under the covers is the equivalent of what would happen if you used the command line tools earlier. All we're doing in VS is just providing some UI layer on top of it. So I hit F5 or hit the play button, and now you see Chrome has launched, and inside the Chrome browser, I see a version of my app surrounded by a device Chrome. And this is actually very convenient because, especially for Android and iOS devices, the rendering engine used is actually based on WebKit, and Chrome is heavily based on WebKit as well. So what you're seeing is a pretty good approximation of what you will see if you were to test on a device. Obviously, there are many quirks, basically because you are in a browser trying to emulate device capabilities. But for early stage development, especially for testing out what I have right now, it's actually very, very functional. And Ripple is not just a preview surface where you can just see what your application looks like right now. You actually have the ability to do some device-specific configurations. Like right now, it's in portrait mode. I can switch to orientation, and if I had any media queries, for example, that needed to activate when the app is in landscape mode, it'll go active right now, and you can actually see all of that coming alive. And you can make other changes as well that require, like, let's say I have an accelerometer or a code that deals with having to move
play with
around.
the sensors.
Yep. I have a demo that comes on later where I'll actually show off some of the functionality right here. But then device and network settings, geolocation. You have a lot of ways of basically being able to simulate how your application will work on a device without actually having to deal with oftentimes the performance issues of using an emulator or some of the inconveniences of actually having to tether a device and having it work. So it's actually pretty sweet in that format. So let's just make sure that everything works, and it by default the blank template says hello, your application is ready. Let's just make it hello world, just to stick be consistent with tradition. Let me hit play again. Very quickly we can see that hello world now appears once the page is loaded, and it all just works fine. So this is the happy path. This is a path where I'm giving a simple demo, things work fine, and everything is great. But a lot of times, though, one of the big things that really be providing with Visual Studio is that it's always had great debugging features. Yes. And it would be great if we could actually integrate the debugging features as part of building your Apache Cordova applications. And so let me quickly segue into that part of the demo where I just say, I'm going to add some more functionality to it, and it will be deliberately broken at first. So Eric, I'll ask you some questions to help me figure out what is broken. So that should be exciting. And then we'll actually some of the debugging features to help us figure it out in a more constructive, more precise way.
Okay.
Cool. So I'm going to add a button.
Okay.
I'm going to call this button change color, and let me give this button ID. Give the ID of change color as well. So let's just make sure this looks as you expect.
At this time, I think it's okay.
I'm pretty sure it's okay, but I also just want to have Ripple running in the background, so I have change color going on.
Okay.
And if I go back into Visual Studio, though, notice that what we're actually showing you is the DOM Explorer. If you're familiar with in-browser development tools, especially debugging tools either from Chrome or from IE's F12, you always have a mechanism for being able to inspect the visual look and feel of what your page looks like. Yeah. And so right now, I'm going to select the click tool, and just go ahead and select the change color button, just to see what's going on. And when I click it, you can quickly see that my markup is highlighted, and any styles that I might have are actually shown right here. So what color should I go with, Eric?
Wow, a blue one?
Let's go with blue. Let's do Azure. Just, given that we're Microsoft, let's do Azure. And if it's were to go jump back into Visual Studio, the Chrome, you can very quickly see that the value specified here is being displayed and updated in real time in Ripple as well.
Yeah.
So you can
Very
make a lot of visual tweaks just by using the functionality you're probably already familiar with. If you have a browser-based workflow that you love and you're very familiar with, our goal is to really not have you learn or relearn all of these things from scratch, but actually just take advantage of what you already know. So that's part of that's something that I want to show off. So that's the only reason, Eric, why I hit F5 after making this minor change.
Okay.
So now let's go ahead and add some code that actually reacts to me clicking on the change color button. So I'm going to go ahead and go into index.js. So actually, before I go there, I think it's worth talking about what device ready actually means. If you're building applications for the web, there are two events a big problem is figuring out when exactly your code needs to run.
Yes.
And the two events you often listen for are the load event, which fires after your DOM and after all your images and external resources. After all of them have loaded, that event fires and then your code can execute from there. Another event that is my personal favorite